Now we're starting.
Okay,
Thanks.
there you go.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. This is it. All right, we got through that. Apologies for our IT stuff, but we're learning this too. So, I'm Steve Cleere, and today's webinar is about inflation, pricing, and profit. Deb mentioned done quite a bit of work in this area in the past, and basically this is something that has a major effect on small companies and very large companies. Now, a quick bit of housekeeping here before we go forward. Thank you very much, folks. I am absolutely overwhelmed at the number of people who responded and it responded to the invitation. We will try to get through questions and everybody's individual things as we can. However, there are a couple people I need to do a call out to real quick, and those are my Fortune 500 friends who actually signed up. And I can't tell if you're in attendance, but whatever. Um, I perhaps got a little carried away in the salesmanship of the webinar. This webinar is really designed for brands under 10 million in annual sales. Really, that what we're going to be talking about is very practical, very down to earth things and how it affects. It's not going to be a high level 2 million, purchase analysis that we would do with IRI or Nielsen. So if you guys are here and you want to stick around and see, I'm going to expose a couple of big company secrets, but don't worry about it. But if you want to go, hey, great, we'll see you next time, and we've got some stuff coming up. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about inflation, pricing, and profit. So first of all, we're all kind of familiar with inflation, although some of you may be of an age where you did not live through the 70s, which was our last period of massive inflation, which wreaked all kinds of havoc. So we're talking about, car loans of 22%, just basically waking up and not knowing where the gas pump was going to go. As a matter of fact, having to put in new gas pumps because nothing ever went up to $100 before. At any rate, inflation affects, of course, pricing on all types of commodities and goods, including the ones that you are producing. And it also affects your profit. And we're going to talk a little bit about how that kind of works in conjunction. That's really what we want to look at. So basically, inflation is the elephant in the room right now. Why? Because we all know, if we have been paying attention, that all prices and everything else out there for things are going up. And I'm sure you've all realized it. If you've been to the gas pumps lately, you understand. And so right now, let's talk about kind of where we are. It's very hard to put a description on this period of time. For right now, I'm going to use the mid-pandemic update, because all signs point to the fact that we are not post-pandemic as we thought we were going to be at this time. We, in fact, are probably in the middle. There is a fourth wave out there. How much effect it has, we're not sure. But what I'm reading, especially in the last 2 or 3 days, has been from some pretty big companies that are canceling events, that are looking at canceling promotions that are around travel because they don't think anybody's going to be traveling in the fourth quarter. All of those things. You can look at that and go any way you want, but if I'm following people that are, larger trade show groups and stuff that are saying, hey, this isn't going to work, the New York Auto Show has been canceled. I mean, that just tells me that, at any rate, things are going to probably slow down again, and we need to be prepared for that. So, all right, what about inflation? First of all, what's going on with inflation? Well, let's do an economic update. In the broad macro market, things are just jumping. I mean, it's amazing. You have very low unemployment rates. You have wages pressure going up. It's just amazing, and people are buying stuff. It's amazing. A record stimulus. Okay, let's face it. Part of the reason those things are jumping is because we've had a record stimulus from the government in response to the pandemic that is basically pouring money into the system. Interest rates are at zero. I mean, all of those things. The result of this has been a record stock market. We just keep looking at it, and yeah, it jumps up and down a little bit here and there on the day. But overall, if you go back over the last year, it's just incredible, the growth that has occurred in the stock market. And, that tends to be the bellwether of where things are going. So we look at it. But you're also having record IPOs, which means not only just the stock market in Fortune 500 companies or in companies that are, emerging tech. We're talking about companies like Robinhood, launching and having an IPO and their stock jumps up 24% in one day. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So all of that is going on. It's basically at this point a boom time, but a lot of the fundamentals, in fact, are not there to sustain it. Now, what may happen is that we may keep going on depending upon what happens with the pandemic, but we may also slow down. Either one of those two things is out there at this point. And here's the tactical realities. Tons of money has been pumped into the system. That money all goes somewhere. And right now, a lot of it is going into consumer spending. So whether it was incentivized stuff from trying to keep people at work or giving them extra money because of pandemic or all of these other things, there's a tremendous amount of money out there that is going through the system. And a lot of that is resulting in a higher purchase demand for consumer goods. That's resulted in supply chain issues. Probably all of you, if you are working with raw goods or any of these different elements, there are supply chain issues out there. And it starts with if you've tried to get a container for shipping, you know what's going on. And I have a company that I work with who in fact needed a container, and their container broker guy who works up in Oakland, California, said, maybe if you could just like slip me a few bills, like $500 or $1,000. And they were like, are we bribing people to get containers? The guy goes, well, it would make it easier. So those kind of things are going on. The price of shipping a container is a whole nother story. That's also gone absolutely through the roof. There's also a tremendous amount of pent-up demand all over the place. So first of all, consumer pent-up demand, because people have been home, people have been locked down. Then they were told, okay, this is going to be the summer of normal. We're going to go back to it. We're going to start traveling, and we hit the airlines and the hotels. And of course, then we're consuming more things. So we weren't necessarily, back out at restaurants, travel, family visits, all of those things. So it's very important that pent-up demand, in fact, causes a spike in the system. And when there's lots of money in the system, it basically just feeds on itself. But services costs are rising. So if you've talked to any of your friends in the restaurant business or in the trucking business, or people who are in the services area have been paid more money because they were at risk or because the company was trying to hold on to them. Whatever the reason was, that $14 an hour just doesn't look so great anymore. And they can find jobs of $19 and $20 an hour where they, in fact, can work a regular shift or work in an office instead of in a restaurant or on a truck. And it's having a real effect. And you can go in any of the major metropolitan areas at this point, and outside of any of the restaurants or any of the trucking companies, or for that matter, plumbing, construction, you will see, help wanted signs and bonuses being paid. You'll hear radio advertisements for truck drivers to pay a $15,000 bonus if you're willing to haul freight. It's absolutely amazing. So that's the tactical reality of what is cranking, if you will, nasty inflation. What's the state of inflation? It's here. There have been significant price increases since a year ago on a lot of things. If you've paid for gas lately, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The idea that, it kind of crept up on us is, it kind of went along with the end of the pandemic. It kind of went up with that pent-up demand. But there's no doubt that it's here. And the question is now, how are the increased prices in all these different sectors going to be reflected in the sectors that they affect? And that's really what this whole idea of dealing with quote unquote inflation as a concept is. So it's not going away soon. That's the first thing. First of all, there's uncertainty. And anytime there's uncertainty, that does not bode well for economic recovery. So we don't know if there's going to be a full fourth wave yet. We don't know what's happening there. We're not sure what the Fed is going to do. So there's all these different things in there. Stocks are going up, but sometimes they go down. There have been great IPOs, but there's also been some real bad ones out there. You have the Chinese government intervening to stop IPOs by Chinese companies in the United States. You've got all kinds of things going on. But we're in a state of flux right now, and that state of flux is here at least till 2022, if not through 2022. The Fed remains fairly confident. Interestingly enough, they've been talking. They haven't raised interest rates. They certainly aren't going to at this point. That's not in the cards. But Jerome Powell, Federal Reserve Chairman, has been talking about inflation. And that's probably good, because to not talk about it is not going to do anybody any good. But he describes it as transitory inflation. And Transitory to me, and maybe to you, transitory is like a guest who comes and stays a little while and then leaves. Meaning transitory inflation would be the price of gasoline goes up to $4.50 a gallon. And then when we get into fourth quarter or whatever, it goes down to $3.75. That's not what Jerome Powell's talking about. Jerome Powell's talking about transitory, meaning it's going to bump up, but then it's not going to be followed by a number of other bumps. In other words, the circumstances that are causing the rise in prices are temporary. He knows the pricing increases are not temporary, but they're not going to continue. So again, let's go back to the 70s. If you were around, if your parents talked about it at all, there was this great thing from President Ford called WIN, which was whip inflation now. And literally interest rates were going up by 5, 6 points or whatever over weeks. Gasoline prices went crazy. There was a lack of gasoline. There were a whole bunch of things that were happening, mortgages, crazy prices for mortgages, 22% Fed rate. So not real good. The Fed is confident that it's transitory, that we're basically going to take a step up in prices. We will plateau off when the temporary things that are affecting it get sorted out. So the supply chain issues go away. Oil or the state of peace in the Middle East, whatever, goes away. They're pretty confident about that. And that's okay. Now, the markets are not so sure. The markets are kind of doing doubles on this in terms of looking at commodity pricing and how that's going. Stock prices, of course, are continuing to climb, but a lot of those stocks are tech stocks. A lot of those stocks are darlings, or they are massive players. They are Amazon, they are Apple, they are Microsoft. And so, again, the total market, not so sure about what's going on. People are being a little bit more cautious about going forward. So what does that mean for us? Well, let's start with what we want to talk about, which is pricing. And so I need to move this. Hold on. No. Hello. It's not moving. Okay, come on. No. It's not moving on the arrow either. Okay. IT. Hello. Hang on 1 second, folks. It's not working. No. Okay. It's actually not IT, it's Deborah, but it's okay. She'll fix it.
Here we go.
Wow. Okay, what did I do wrong?
I have no idea.
Okay, sorry, folks. We're talking about products and pricing. So, all right, so what we want to talk about here is we want to talk about a selection of different things when we talk about pricing. Okay, so product pricing is what we're mainly talking about because you guys are mainly CPG folks. So we're talking about how does the pricing or changes in pricing affect products, and in particular your product, very important. And it's mainly due to costs that are rising that at this point are not within your control. Yes, you can hold the line on labor costs if you want to and whatever, but if you get the notice from the guy who's selling you sliced lemons that the cost of sliced lemons is going up, you don't have much of a choice if what you're making is lemonade. So COGS. Let's talk about your cost of goods for just a minute. I know you don't want to, but part of the purpose of having the webinar is to actually get you to focus back on your COGS if you haven't recently, because you really need to. And that's why it really is such an important webinar, because at this point in time, if you have not within the last 6 weeks totally reviewed your COGS from top to bottom, you need to do that, because otherwise you're going to be in some serious hurt as far as your pricing and as far as your profits go. Just the way it is, unfortunate. And we're talking about wholesale pricing here. So we're really talking about, and we're going to talk about other ones too, but we are talking about wholesale pricing and possibly adjusting your wholesale pricing or your offerings. You can do this, in a couple of different ways, but we want to do that for sure. So let's take a deep dive. Costs and COGS. All right, I'll take one of the more visible ones. This is really easy. Transportation, and I'm defining this as goods coming to you to assemble, to put together your stuff. Transportation costs across the board are just crazy, right? And so there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. There's not enough trucks, there's not enough drivers because we've had this huge boom. And so that means that your stuff getting to you from your suppliers is costing more money. Shipping, I'm going to define as from you to your customers, to your consumers. to your wholesale customers. Shipping costs have also increased. And by the way, they are going to continue to increase. We are anticipating fourth quarter surcharges from every major transportation shipping supplier, including the United States Postal Service. So your nice little $7.35 flat rate box is probably going to be $8 in Q4. So all these costs are going up. This affects everything. And every time something moves, it gets affected. So once you've produced a product, you send it out there, your distributor picks it up. Maybe that's okay. Your distributor is paying higher diesel costs. But if you're shipping containers, right, or you're shipping, anything else, loads, car loads, right, railroad cars, whatever it is, costs up. So it puts costs obviously into your goods. Packaging costs. If you haven't looked at packaging costs, if you haven't ordered packaging lately, you need to, because the next time you go to order packaging, you can't use the cost you had before. Plastics are going up like crazy. Why? Because oil is going up like crazy. Cardboard is going up. Why? Because there's just more demand for its usage. There's a lot more stuff being packaged. There's a lot more consumer goods out there. It's competition, and corrugate has also gone up. Plastic in general for packing, again, driven by oil pricing mainly, but also by, the ability to be able to produce plastics. You have little plastic balls that ship in rail cars, and they go to places and they make bubble wrap. Well, there are only so many places that do that. There's only so many places that make plastic balls. There's so many places that make bubble wrap. And right now they're totally stretched out. So what do you do when you reach capacity? You increase your prices, because why wouldn't you increase your prices? Let's talk about commodities. So this is basically raw materials. This is, if you're using wheat, if you're using any type of dairy, if you're using any of those things as a food commodity or something that you're putting into a beverage, stevia, doesn't matter. Prices have increased. So that puts pressure and also increase your COGS. Labor. For those of you who have labor, meaning, a labor group, like you hire more than 5 people or whatever at a time, you know how hard it is to get people, first of all. And one of the ways that you continue to get people is you have to inch up the labor costs. If you're putting on a second shift, the second shift costs more than the first shift. Just does. Well, guess what? That means that the products that are produced on that second shift have a higher COGS, whether you've calculated it or not yet. That's what's going on. Labor is probably going to be one of the largest. There is a seismic shift that has occurred because of the pandemic, with people not being able to work or getting paid extra to work, or whatever the situation, getting an unemployment rate that was more than the check they ever got. And there's a new attitude toward that, which is, I'm not going to stand on my feet for 8 hours for $13 an hour. That's just not going to happen. And again, this varies by where you are, but that's the reality. The reality is that shift is taking place. And at the same time, there are other jobs opening up that even semi-skilled workers can begin to take, or they're up for moving. So maybe now is a good thing. Wow, I spent a whole year and a half in my hometown. I'm not interested. I think I'm going to move someplace, and I'm going to move to where there is a higher dollar. So again, these increased costs have to be looked after in your COGS. So I'll take a drink of water, because this is the tough part. I'm asking you, as part of this webinar, to redo your COGS. Your cost of goods need to be redone based upon current costs, current pricing from your suppliers, from your raw materials, from your transportation, your packaging. There is not a thing, except maybe unless you're making it in your own kitchen, that it hasn't touched. So you need to redo your COGS, because you need to know where you are versus where you're going to go. Okay, and once we've done that, take a look at how your margins look. And I'm going to take a wild guess and tell you that your margins you have today are not the margins you had a year and a half ago, pre-pandemic, or 2 years ago. No way. Your margins have been impacted. So you got to recalculate your COGS. Put everything back in it. By recalculating, it's recalculating not only the costs where you redid your costs, but you need to recalculate your margin, because you need to maintain your margin. You need to see if your margin, in fact, is still working. This is very important. So And the slide says maintain compression. It's supposed to be margin compression, but that's okay. Margin compression is when your margins start slipping away from you due to outside costs. So let's just take a really nifty example, and this is really simplified, folks. But I need you to follow it. Let's say your margin is 40%. That's not uncommon for an emerging CPG brand. On a per unit basis, I've got a built-in margin of 40% because somebody told me that's what I should do or whatever, but let's just say that's where it is. And let's say your wholesale, just to keep it simple, is 10 bucks. What happens is your profit, your product profit per unit is $4. This doesn't include your other overhead and stuff, but your profit per unit is $4. And actually, probably at this point, your COGS have been affected more than your total overhead. Your insurance costs have probably not gone up that much, for instance. But your profit is $4. If your COGS increase by $2, somewhere in that calculation, there's another $2 worth of cost that you didn't have in there that are now reality. That means that your margin is reduced by $2, which is 50% of your total per unit profit. So even if it's 50 cents, it's a lot, right? But it's 50% of your profit. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't maintain a business where I forecast that I'm going to be making $4 a unit and I'm only making $2. That's just not going to work because so many other things are based on that. But this is an exercise I ask you to please do because you need to see where it really is. And that brings us to raising prices, which is a pretty scary thing. And I'm here to tell you, it's not easy. And I say we, I'm talking about our community of emerging brands in CPG. We are already on the high end of pricing for most of our categories. Why? Because higher quality, because we produce with integrity, because we're producing small numbers. We don't have scale yet. So, it's very important and understand we are high priced. But if you're going to try to maintain your margin, and you should at least look at modeling how to maintain your margin. I'm not saying raise prices today. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying understand where you are. That's very, very important. So you need to maintain margin, or you at least need to know where you are in your margin. And so how do I do that? Okay. First of all, you can reflect cost increases by raising prices. You can simply say, okay, if my COGS are 75 cents per unit more than they were, I'm going to raise my wholesale price by 75 cents and maintain my margin. Now, that may do a whole lot of other things, which we're going to talk about, but that's one of the ways to look at it. You also need to anticipate higher costs. And as much as in advising people to say you need to anticipate, they say, well, doesn't that cause inflation? Well, yeah, in some ways it does. But if you think that the big guys, and if you get big guys who are still here, if you think that the guys, at Unilever are not figuring out 6 months, 12 months down the road where price cost increases are coming in, you're crazy. They do that all day long. And they're going to put that into their pricing, how they do it. So you also need to anticipate where the higher costs are going to come from. Let's just say you create a product that is based around pea protein. Pea protein prices are going to go up. Why? Because so many more people want to have products with pea protein in it, and there's only so many peas being grown. Just that's it. Going to happen. That's called anticipating higher costs. Next year's crop of peas is going to have a demand on it that is way greater than this year's crops. So costs are going to go up. You also want to think about raising prices to be able to fund promotions and advertising. Now, I'm not saying to just go ahead and say, oh, I'm going to put, $1 on here so that I can, advertise on Amazon. But I'm saying you look at a certain percentage of that cost of goods of your margin should be going back into promotion and advertising for the product, or back into part of your overhead. You can put that out on a per unit basis if you want to, but it really doesn't. Most of your volumes are probably too small for that to be significant, and it would just confuse the issue. So, but think about raising prices, because let's say if I was able to get an extra 50 cents and I was to put that 50 cents into Amazon display advertising, I might be able to move, right, more product. Or if I was able to take a 15% temporary price reduction, TPR, at the stores I'm in and take that to 20%, I know I can move a lot more volume and recoup a little bit. So that's part of raising prices. Why to consider raising prices? You can also adopt the attitude called wait and see, which is you redo your COGS, you look at your margin, you realize you're suffering from margin compression, and you go, well, I'll wait and see what happens. But in the meantime, every unit that moves is moving with less margin than you have in your forecasts. Which prices are we talking about dealing with here? Well, first of all, we're mainly talking about raising a wholesale price. Now, depending upon how you structure your pricing, there's usually 2 or 3 different prices. But your wholesale price should be that you are selling to people who are selling the product in your behalf, to third parties. That's your distributor, that's retailers, that's people on Abound or Fair or Thrive. That it's platforms that sell wholesale. So you're talking about raising your wholesale price. Now, you may also have a distributor price. If you don't sell to your distributor at your wholesale and then back off the difference off invoice, then you have a distributor cost. And you're also talking here about raising your distributor cost because your cost of goods have gone up. We also look at MSRP because your suggested retail price also has to increase. Otherwise, you're saying to your retailer, hey, I want you to take the hit. And that's not going to go over very well. So those are the prices, really that we're talking about. It also concerns your shelf price. Now, you have MSRP, which is what you think it should be at Safeway or Albertsons or Kroger for. And then you have what it really is. So understand that if you adjust your wholesale or your distributor price, that shelf price is going to be reflected in some way. Now, maybe within the category, maybe for a certain period of time, retailer may elect not to do that. They may elect to absorb it. But in general, they're probably just going to pass it straight on. So that's going to top your shelf price. And then you need to look at the shelf, obviously, in your category and see how that's going to affect you vis-a-vis the competition. You may be surprised to find out that the competition has already raised their prices. Direct to consumer prices. For those of you who sell from your website, direct to consumer, that's a price that is also going to have to go up too. Why? Well, your shipping price is going to go up. So if you include shipping in your product, you're going to hit on your margins big time. If you don't include shipping, it's still going to raise the total cost at checkout that you want to consider. And there's some things we can talk about to help mitigate that circumstance. But your D2C price is going to have to change to maintain your margin. And then your platform prices, your Amazons, your Walmart.coms, platforms like that you need to, and again, Thrive, Abound, Alibaba, whatever you're using, your platform prices need to increase too, because they all share in that same margin compression. It's your wholesale that's getting hit. I mean, it really is. And that's how you need to look at it. How to raise prices carefully, right? Why do we say that? Raising prices is not to be taken lightly, but raising prices is usually inevitable within your business. If you're in CPG, I can't think of anything that's ever gone down in price. So you need to look at it as it's part of what we're going to do, but let's do it smartly and let's see if we really need to do it first of all, and then how do we do it? So we say carefully. First thing is, once you get through the math we've talked about with COGS and your wholesale pricing and how that would affect it and everything else, you determine what your justifiable increase would be. We're not trying to pad pockets here. We're trying to simply stay alive. That's really what it comes down to. No one is saying we're going to go, to Europe for 3 weeks next year with the price increase we're going to take. We're talking about covering transportation costs, raw good costs, and labor costs. That's really what we're doing. So determine what that justifiable increase is that you can actually say to a buyer, look, my costs have gone XXX. And by the way, the buyer already knows that because he or she's already heard that story. And then you do the communication. We regret the inconvenience that this is going to cause. However, we are raising our prices as of. Customarily, that's an announcement that comes out with sort of a 14 to 30-day window, sometimes a 60-day window. Larger companies, larger CPG companies will often use a price rise as a selling opportunity because they will announce it 60 days in advance, and everybody down the line, their wholesale, their retailers, get to purchase product at the current price for the next 60 days. And the retailer, distributor will sometimes forward buy at that point in time, which increases the sales volume during that period of time. And it's a little tricky, but I've seen it done. And again, you figure out, first of all, how badly you're hurting, if you are hurting. You determine the justifiable increase, you do the announcement, but then you give a period of time that you can buy at the current price. You can do an ex post facto raise, and I've been with companies that have done that too. By the way, August 1st, our prices increased X. And then it's a done deal, and there's no forward buying. But we are honoring all orders and POs in-house at this time. So nothing changes. But it means the next one is going to change, and we have to look at that. So again, carefully, but that's how you do it. You'll also raise your DTC and platform prices first. Why do you do that? You do it because two things. Number one is it helps you with, excuse me, it's my four-legged virtual assistant is down. You're supposed to be virtual, Buddy. It's Buddy. Some of you have seen Buddy. But you basically raise D2C, Amazon first, because it does a couple things. It gives you, if there's going to be a bad reaction, you're going to see the bad reaction. It's also going to help you with immediate cash flow, whereas your wholesale may take 30 or 60 days for that price increase to come in. Everything you're selling between then and now is at a price that's reduced margin. So this is painful, not saying it isn't. How do you ease the pain? Okay. The good news is it's reasonable to expect a volume decrease. Now, you're going, wait a minute. What am I doing? Hold on. I was just trying to get to a certain velocity. And yep, got it. But there's a good possibility that for a period of time, both at retail or at your distributor, okay, you may in fact have a volume decrease in response to your, to your price increase. A lot of times it doesn't happen, right? And it doesn't happen for a lot of reasons. One of the good things about being at the higher end of the pricing spectrum as an emerging brand in your category is that you're high priced already. If it's $12 for a bottle of, ketchup, the fact that it goes to $13 is not going to stop anybody from buying it. Why? Because if you're paying $12 for a bottle of ketchup, you're out of pricing is already out of your decision-making process. Okay. If you were price sensitive, you'd be buying Heinz or Hunt's. Okay. So that's already done. Now, of course, yes, everybody has a limit. Everybody has I'm not going to pay for that. But most of you are already priced beyond that, and particularly with up and coming brands. Now, if you're fighting in the trenches in a category, and there is that aspect, is that this may have to be a larger consideration for you as to whether or not you can take that. But you also have to look at how much more margin compression can I take before I start selling everything at a loss, and that's not good either. So, okay, I lost my cursor. So there we go. All right. So you can mask the increase. This is one of the things that we talk about doing a lot in larger CPG, is basically we have a price increase coming up. It's coming down from senior management. There's nothing that anybody in the marketing or sales department can do about it. It's just it's gonna happen. So we're going to help to mask the increase. And how do we do that? We basically start off by offering promotions that are greater than the increase. Okay. So excuse me a minute, bud, you need to get out of here. Thanks. Get some catnip. He's a good guy. But offering promotions that are greater than the increase. All right. And that's pretty simple, which is let's just say if your pricing is going to go up on wholesale 10%, then what you do is that when that happens, you offer a 15% discount. The product ends up being, after the price increase, 5% lower, but in the meantime, it's being sold at a promotional price. You can do this also at wholesale. It's entirely possible to do wholesale. So you can offer a distributor, for instance, a promotion. If you take X amount of volume to this period of time, we're gonna honor that. We're gonna give you an extra, 5%, and you can get through it. But that's one of the ways that you mask the increase. Tie it to a time of lower volume. Okay, if any of you out there have products that are in the back to school mode right now, you're just getting ready to ramp up, that is not the time. Sorry, you can't do it now. That's just crazy. if you're back to school, if your high volume is third quarter and fourth quarter of the year, let's talk in January, you still need to do the exercise because you need to know where you are. But you're not going to do anything until after you're out of your seasonal high time because it's just not a way to do it. You also want to consider other things like resizing. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. That's what a lot of companies in larger CPG end up doing. And you will see that, we call it bag inflation. So it's more air, less potato chips. And then last but not least, January 1st. Why? Because that's when 50% of the price increases in CPG occur, January 1st. It's kind of traditional. It isn't a real big selling time. It's a date that everybody knows, and the letter arrives or the email arrives in the computer when the buyer is out for Christmas vacation. So that's probably the reasons. Also, a lot of companies are still on calendar fiscals. And if you're on calendar fiscal, it helps from a big accounting standpoint to basically change that price on the 1st of January. How do you reprice without pricing changes? Cost reductions. You can look at your COGS and go, whoa, I think I can get away with using a ground pepper instead of the larger pepper flakes. You can go through that and you can try to maintain your wholesale price and maintain your margin by reducing your cost of goods. Absolutely fair. You can reduce the size, weight, or quantity involved in your packaging. You can move from a 10 ounce to an 8 ounce. You can move from 12 burritos to 10. Been there, done that. It's very, very common in larger CPG because there's less pain involved in it. Now, it causes some issues in manufacturing, but if you're going from 12 burritos to 10 burritos, you can make up that whatever you had to do in the factory to do that and the new packaging pretty darn quickly. But that is an option. You can also introduce more efficiencies. You can automate processes in your production. Again, you can get more software to do stuff that now you're spending time doing or you're paying employees to do. You can do that. And again, that factors into your cost of goods. You can also look at packaging methods. So again, if you're in glass, you can change to plastic. If you're in plastic, you can change to a thinner plastic. There's a lot of different ways to look at it, but packaging is a huge part of the cost. And again, one of those inflation sensitive things. And you can look at doing those without having to change your wholesale pricing and getting your margin back. You can also reduce overhead. So, you can, get less insurance. You can, again, if you're doing stuff where you're automating, you can cut employees. You can, there's a number of different ways. You can reduce overhead. Doesn't affect your COGS, but it does affect your ability to maintain, right, the wholesale. It goes into your total overall accounting, and so maybe you can do with a little less margin because you've reduced your overhead. Entirely possible. Summarize our stuff here. Costs have increased, and what we're really looking at, the whole reason for having this webinar is because in talking with a number of people that on the podcast, people that I work with, people we have contact with, the cost increase are coming home. And they're beginning to see it, feel it, and need to deal with it. So I work with a client who actually had packaging in production on the line, coming off the line, and the company producing the packaging said, oh, by the way, there's an addendum to the quote. So you thought it was going to be 5 cents, right, a run, and now it's going to be 7 cents a run. That's happening, and it's probably happening to you. So what else can we look at? Well, there's a couple things. First of all, we can understand that there's more coming. And why? A couple of reasons. Uncertainty is the biggest one. We don't know what's going on right now. We're mid-pandemic. We have no idea. But we know that going forward, that things are going to have to change, and that larger companies that are in commodity business or transportation business or whatever they're doing, if they're offering truck drivers as $15,000 bonuses to drive trucks, who's going to pay that $15,000 bonus? You are. So that means more margin compression. And you kind of have to watch this, but margin compression is something that's been used in the industry as a term for a long time, mainly on the retail side, because they feel it a lot, and usually a lot quicker than the manufacturers do. But margin compression is serious. It's here, and we need to figure that out. You need to adjust pricing or costs, either one, to maintain, to stay on your forecast. And this may be a good time to see if that forecast that you did, that margin you originally picked up from wherever you decided to do it from, is actually working for you. It may not be. And, and then we have to kind of go from there. And then ease the pain if you decide that you need to increase prices. Do it smartly, do it carefully, and do it with, at a level that is justifiable based on the analysis you've done of your costs. It's only fair. Distributors won't like it. Buyers don't like it. Nobody likes it. But the truth of the matter is it's happening all over. It's probably happening in your category, and you just need to be, if you can be, ahead of the curve. So we're going to go right now into a little Q&A or a little discussion part, depending upon how the questions go. And I want to see if, whoops, no, I need to go back. Not quite. There we go. Q&A in the chat. And I think, I'm not sure.
You already, hi, Steve. You already have one in there from Melissa.
Okay.
So it's, so I kind of go back into.
No, oops.
Sorry. Just don't touch anything, honey.
Okay, I can't. Yeah, I can't see the chat. So.
Okay, that's okay. So Elizabeth wanted to know, would it be a little easier to increase over time? Might that be easier to swallow? And then there's some responses back to that in the chat, and I'll come see if I can get the chat open for you.
Okay.
So you can answer that.
Yeah. So I think there's so much that is dependent upon the reaction of the other parties that you're dealing with, whether it's your distributor, your retailer, the folks that you're selling the website to. In general, I think if you're anticipating a price increase of anywhere upwards of 10%, between 1 and 10%, I would do it immediately in one fell swoop. You don't want to elongate the period of time that you're going to feel the pain. You want to get it over with. And you also want to increase your cash flow. If you're looking at a 20% increase, you might take a 10% now and a 10% in spring to out a little bit. But remember, all the things you got to go through, if you, again, push that process out, it puts all those things back into play again. And it also gives a buyer or a distributor another chance to go, you just raised prices 6 months ago. What are you doing? It's like, okay. So I would be more in the camp, not knowing your individual situation. I'd be more in the camp of doing the price rise once and doing it right.
Yeah, and there's a couple of different answers in here. So I'll let you look at those
All
too.
right. I can. I'll
see if
share.
you want to respond to those. And then we'll see if anyone else has questions.
I think increases a little over time. No, I agree. This would be an obvious response to addition response category. Dangerous. Continue. Yeah. I think it's, from a strategic standpoint, it's much better to take the price, take the price at once, figure out what it's going to be. Now, there are companies, CPG companies, who, as part of their strategic operations, review price increases on a yearly basis. And it's that January 1st thing. It's basically publicly held companies have shareholders and responsibilities. And so if your wholesale pricing and your COGS are out of whack, that's a major effect. And so they review prices every single year, some more than a year, but a lot of stuff is based on calendar. A lot of stuff is based on season. So I would tend, especially for a smaller, where you're working on thin margin anyway, I would take the price increase, justifiable price increase, all at once.
Yeah. Are there any other questions?
Do we have anything else anybody want to look at? Timing. Oh, yeah, we have one. Timing. So timing, we talked a little bit about in terms of seasonality. If you don't have a particularly highly seasonal product, I think a lot of this depends upon the calculations that you do. So if you look at the calculation and your margin has gone away, then sooner is the time that you want to do it. If delaying doesn't really do much of anything. I mean, except maybe allow some other people to raise their prices in your category ahead of you to make it a kind of a little easier. But pretty much the big guys have all looked at this, and you can go in and take a look at a box of Cheerios today. And if you bought it 6 months ago, you'll probably find it's higher priced. And if it's not, it's because the retailer's probably taken the hit. So, you have to look at that. But, it's a good time to do it is when you have all the facts available and you can go forward. Just don't, if you have seasonality, if you're a back to school product or you're if you're a Christmas product, you can do it now, but you don't want to be doing it in November. You wait until your seasonality is over, and then, and nobody's really sort of paying much attention, and then you take it. If you are selling wholesale basis to larger conventional grocery, drug, or mass, you have annual or semi-annual category reviews. You always want to do your price increase ahead of the category review, significantly ahead of the category review. Normally, and I say normally, that takes place about 6 months from the seasonal. So ice cream is in July, and so ice cream reviews in December. You want to take that price increase in the tail end of your high season, but before the review comes along, because you want it set up before that. You don't want the review to be a discussion of your price increase. What else?
It looks like that might be.
That might be it.
Yeah.
Okay. And we can work with that.
And if anyone has any, by the way, I'm one of those people that come up with questions after something. So feel free to send Steve a LinkedIn message, an email, or email me or LinkedIn with me. That is fine too. And we'll get back to you and answer those questions.
For those of you who may not have heard the news or have a little confusion as to what that logo is doing up there, the basic news is that we have had two entities for a while: Next Level Marketing, which has been my consulting work, and also production on the podcast, the Next Level Brands podcast, and Kitchen to Shelf, which Deborah and I started as an educational arm to create courses and classwork, workshops and stuff for folks who are looking to get into or looking to scale their businesses. And we've decided to get rid of that difference and put them all under one roof, which is now called Next Level Brands. And that's where Next Level Brands podcast comes in. If you do not know about the podcast, it's a weekly podcast. It airs on Thursdays and contains interviews with founders and key partners within the industry. And that's what what we've been putting together. Our outcome of this is, obviously, we would like to have you become a member of our Next Level Brands community. And our community is going to be a cohort of CPG founders and team members, other industry experts, key partners, key strategic partners, funders. And we're going to be getting together to basically share information and allow you to have access to classes and workshops, resources, cheat sheets, checklists, all of those things, videos with folks that you've heard on the podcast to talk about very specific things in building your business from people who've been there and done that. Also, some great service providers that we work with, and we have clients who work with, and we want you to kind of get to know them as well and see if it's something that's going to help you build your business.
Yep. And I think we just had that part on there. So does anyone have any last questions before we go?
If you can get to the chat. And by the way, if not, it's steve@nextlevelbrands.com. That's 2 X's, or Deborah@nextlevelbrands.com, 2 X's. You can just send us a note. We'd be happy to send you a link. You can kind of use the webinar if you want to as a checklist for going through the process of looking at your COGS and checking your prices. And if you have specific comments or specific questions regarding your brand and your products or whatever, by all means, reach out. We'll try to get them answered. And if we can't answer them, we probably know somebody who can.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. And we'll talk to you all later. Oh, speaking of which, sorry, we will also be having another webinar coming up. We'll send you some information on it. It's going to be about Q4. Q4 is going to be an amazing ride, folks, but you got to be prepared for it. So we'll talk to you about Q4 next time out.